A-Team players, and welcome back. Love being a part of your Monday afternoon, your winning ways. And we got so much stuff going on. Steve, you've been with us all year. We love your team, and we hope it pays for you, my man.
Joe, couple things here. I mean, we're in for a really interesting Monday night here. One of the teams that we've been on all year, for better or for worse, through sickness and health, has been the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking about this the other day. And when I was going through my DFS lineups and looking at all the bad weather that was supposed to come on Sunday and never really materialized, just thinking that, Thursday, all the things that Thursday 49ers has put us through, all of the things that we've suffered through with the Detroit Lions and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Gibbs. We got a lot of people today, a lot of regulars, a lot of people that have been with us all year that are looking for wins from this group of players, and it's big time names up on the board. So let's get down and dirty here, and let's see what's it kind of looking like. So Steve is up by 26 in this league, potentially going to win 12K. St. Brown, and he has St. Brown, and the opponent has Gibbs and Debo. Well, there's a couple things to think about here, right? Is that when we look at what's going on for Detroit, is that San Francisco is suffering a lot on the defensive front. They're giving up a lot of points to running backs over the last couple of weeks. So, I mean, an easy projection here for Gibbs in a PPR league is definitely looking at somewhere around 20 points, right? So what I see potentially as happening, Gibbs goes up, gets an early touchdown. And Dan Campbell has said multiple times, Joe, and you can talk about this as well, but he said multiple times that he's going to go wire to wire, that his players are going to play the whole game regardless. But what we've seen,
kind of asinine, but yeah, that's what he wants to do.
What we have seen, though, is especially last week, going back to last week's game against, where Gibbs was supposed to have like a monumental game. And then for some reason, he didn't get anything. He couldn't get going in the second half or whatever, right? So it is a very real possibility that maybe at halftime in this game, Dan Campbell kind of wakes up and says, regardless if I win this game or not, it's next week's game that really matters. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, Steve, I think you have a pretty good chance of winning this because for all intents and purposes, Gibbs is probably good for at least 20, at least. And Amon-Ra is probably good for about 15 points. That puts him somewhere in that 7 catches, 80 yards, or 4 catches, 40 yards and a touchdown, somewhere in that kind of situation. I think that the Debo wild card kind of puts a little bit of a damper on how I feel about San Francisco or how I feel about Detroit right now in general. Debo came on last week, and Debo's one of our boys, Joe. But one of the things that I think that is really important to know is that San Francisco really has nothing to play for. So if something were to happen with Debo, he starts cramping up, whatever, it's lights out. How do you feel about that?
So I look at this as a starting point. I think that pretty much Gibbs is giving them rather the 26. I think you need to approach the game like that. Gibbs is going to cover your lead already, which really simplifies the equation. Amon versus Debo. And while in the past we have seen Debo go apeshit, no doubt about it. We have not seen it this year. It has been the bane of my one major thing I wish was different this season was Debo not sucking. And at the end of the day, Bob is right. Detroit, I'm assuming they have the tiebreaker over Philadelphia, has nothing to play for if they do indeed have the tiebreaker over Philly. The division gets satisfied next week regardless. That's the one part I've been able to find is Detroit has a tiebreaker over Philly.
Detroit's either 1 or 5. They're either going.
Okay, so they do that. So tonight means absolutely nothing then. From a Detroit standpoint, that part would worry me a little bit, but the fact of how much Debo has been non-existent, really doesn't, because to whatever degree Ahmad gets shut down, Gibbs gets shut down in equal stature. So if they both don't play a single snap, Debo's not getting 26. If they both play the full game, you have the chance of Debo going off and Ahmad having a quieter shell. I just doubt that Gibbs would get to the 26. Long story short, Steve, I think that you're in good shape. I'm not drinking until the end of the third quarter.
So yeah, I mean, to build off this, Joe, and this goes into the next question here from Nick about Amon-Ra. And when we look at what we're dealing with here, is that over the last 5 games, San Francisco has been giving up less points to players that play in the slot. Amon-Ra plays the majority of his snaps in the slot, but he does move around. There is concern there that Amon-Ra doesn't have a very, very high ceiling. I mean, just looking at some of his games where he's had a lower ceiling, where they haven't had to use him a lot, you're still looking. At his lowest point this year, he was this first game of the season, 6 targets, 3 receptions, 13 yards. I'm not even going to count that. But your lowest kind of targets here are 2 and 4. And so when I look at it and say, okay, well, there is a floor of 4 receptions, 37 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, he, other than 3 games in the middle of the season, he's been pretty reliable for those touches. And so, looking at it here, Nick, for you, thinking, where is the pathway for 22? Like I said, I could see.
The pathway for 23 is pretty easy, dude. It's 10 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown.
What we're looking at,
which isn't out of the realm.
What we're looking at here, and this plays into this question here as well from George, looking at Goff, is how many passes, in order to answer this question really well, how many passes do we think Goff is going to throw tonight? Because that really is going to be the framework of navigating what Amon-Ra is going to get, because Amon-Ra really has a huge target share over a lot of other
See, I'm going to go out on a limb tonight, Bob, and this is contrary for the Goff people. I think part of the reason they're going wire to wire is I think they want him to win the MVP. I bet he throws 35 times.
Yeah, we did talk about that. It's a very
real possibility. The NFL is trying to give it to Lamar, putting him on the Saturday game by himself for national TV after what he did on Christmas. This is Goff's chance to throw a counterpoint. And by the way, apparently destroying the Jets is not enough to make yourself MVP worthy. Being the MVP for the first 12 weeks and destroying
Mitchell
the Jets
Trubisky got in that game. Our boy Mitchell Trubisky. You want to know, fun fact, everybody?
Alex should be the MVP, but it's going to end up being Lamar.
On our very first episode ever, when we first began this podcast, I was living in an apartment with my wife, and our first episode ever was Joe talking to me about the Steelers, and I went out on a limb, said I love Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, I kind of do, but at the same point in time, that game was ridiculous the other day. But one of the things I think that we need to look at here for Goff, and this plays into your question here, George, is I do think, honestly, that Gibbs is going to be at least 20 points. And like we said earlier to Steve's question and building off that, you're going to get at least 20, I think, out of Gibbs, unless they decide to pull him for some godforsaken reason. Kittle, on the other hand, is also in it for probably about 6 catches. You could definitely see him accumulating 6 catches somewhere along the line, but it really depends on how much pressure Detroit puts on that front for San Francisco, because San Francisco is dealing with a lot of injuries.
Kittle will lead them in fantasy points.
But San Francisco is dealing with a lot of injuries. And there is, in a game that there's nothing really to play for, you got to ask yourself, for oft-injured players like Debo, like Kittle, how much are they actually going to play? They are playing for pride. They do want to win these games.
This is their last national game.
So, it makes a difference. But going back to Goff here and looking at how many pass attempts Goff has had over the course of the season, Joe, you're looking at, he's definitely not going to be throwing 50. He's definitely not going to be throwing 40. So if you put Goff somewhere between 25 and 30 pass attempts tonight, and you look and you see that Amon-Ra has about 25% of that target share. How many targets is that? Quick math for me. If you
So
go
25% of 30 is going to be 12 targets.
All right. So if you are looking at 12 targets, you're looking for a good game out of Amon-Ra.
I'm looking at Nick winning his league.
If you don't get that and say that he goes down to 24 pass attempts, which is not out of the realm of possibility, you could definitely see a lower output from Amon-Ra. But I think it's really safe to say that he's somewhere at that 15-point range and with a peak of somewhere around 24. So if he can get that in a PPR league, I think it's going to be pretty solid. And George, from what I remember, yours is a non-PPR league, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, but he only needs to outscore Goff by 2. He's going to do that.
Yeah, and realistically speaking,
one touchdown from either of them does that, actually.
Yeah, looking at San Francisco, there's a very real possibility that, this works a little bit against Steve, but it might be possible that Goff doesn't have to do a lot. I mean, there has been a game where Goff went 12 for 15, against Tennessee. But typically speaking, you're probably going to get somewhere between 25 and 30, like 24 and 32, 35, maybe pass attempts from Goff, even though this game doesn't really matter. So I think Amon-Ra's pretty safe. I also think that Kittle's pretty safe too. Just coming up and looking at Purdy's recent pass statistics and then comparing that to Kittle's target share. Kittle has been rolling with about 20% target share. Brock Purdy is sitting here completing past 2 games. He's been over 30 both times. That's probably.
And there's no reason for that to change tonight.
That's probably going to be the case tonight. So looking at that conservatively, 20% of 32, you're looking at a pretty good fair share of targets for Kittle as well.
Yeah, 10 targets.
Yeah, so I think that having Kittle and Gibbs on your side is going to offset anything that Goff can put up, because you're looking at a ceiling game for Goff somewhere around the low 20s, and that is where most people, including ourselves, have Gibbs at, is a low 20 number. You're down by 1, so Kittle kind of, makes up that difference there. As it goes for you, Recon, this is a little bit of a tougher sled. We saw.
Yeah, you're in trouble, Recon, because the only way you're getting there with Laporta outscoring Amon and you getting the +8 points is Laporta's got to get 3 touchdowns. I mean, it's the only realistic way you're doing it.
So, yeah, I mean, looking at, but see, that's the market though, Joe, where I am a little bit on the Laporta train, because Laporta without Montgomery is kind of that guy that could be used for that touchdown market. So if we see that Goff is throwing for 2 touchdowns, one of those touchdowns could be to Tim Patrick, because Tim Patrick has been stealing a bit of touches from him recently. But if you look over the last several weeks, you're looking at a target share for Sam Laporta in the vein of 17, 16, 18. So
yeah, which obviously is a lot less than 25% that Amon's going to have. So Laporta's going to lose both in terms of receptions and yardage. The only spot he can make it up is touchdowns.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
That's the reality for you, Recon. You got to hope that he has an explosive tight end day, which is 3 touchdowns. Yeah. Recon, I loved you all year. I don't think you're leaving on a W though, man. This is a really hard spot to overcome. Because again, if a mock is shut down, Laporta's getting shut down too. Basically, the top ones on offense are going to get shut down. And my guess is that they shut down the skill players and keep their line going. If they even shut it down at all.
It is a better matchup for Laporta, though. It is a better matchup for Laporta. There's a likelihood that I could see that Laporta could get 2 touchdowns tonight. But again, like Joe was saying, you're having to make up that 8-point difference. That's really, really difficult. Landon, being up 45 and having Kittle left and having him have Amon-Ra and Jake Bates is a better situation, a much better situation to be in. You can probably comfortably walk yourself into George Kittle at least, minimum 10, which is a minimum for a tight end, maximum probably somewhere around 17. So then you look at it and you say, okay, well, if Amon-Ra goes up and puts up 24 points, that means that Jake Bates most likely has put up less than 9. Because if they're scoring touchdowns, that's kind of walking you out of that field goal zone. If it's all yardage from Amon-Ra, like 150 yards and then, 7 receptions, then maybe Jake Bates gets a little bit in there. But I definitely see you having a really good chance here because
I think you have better than a really good chance, Landon.
because if Kittle's on fire, that means that they're not making field goals with Jake Bates.
I don't think it matters. I don't think you can add up everything Amon Jake Bates gets before Kittle even gives you a point. I think you already won.
Into something
you already won,
really
man.
Big, and it's something that I talked about with Joe, and it's something here that Austin brought up, and Landon has him on his team as well. I mean, kudos to T. Higgins. T. Higgins throwing down for its owners when it really matters, and his performance was probably one of the best fantasy performances in a championship week outside of Alvin Kamara that we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Just really taking over the game. And then you look at other performances like JSN, Keenan Allen, just getting hurt or not performing well, and looking at it and say, this championship week, among almost all other championship weeks in past history, has been super unique in terms of just and what happened. Like, this is the craziest thing, everybody. If you follow, DraftKings Millie Maker, Drew Lock was, I believe, or very close to being the number 1 quarterback, and was on the Millie team at one point during the day. Somebody stacked Drew Lock with Malik Neighbors when it mattered the most, which is absolutely absurd to me. It's crazy. And Austin, I feel you here. I mean, there was a lot of performers that really let us down this week, but it goes without saying, that getting to this point feels good in and of itself. So if you win second, you win first. Obviously, you want to win first, but it feels good. And speaking of first and second, kudos to Jason. Jason, love to see that you're coming back in as a champion in one league, and looking at it and saying, winner take all leagues. Joe, we've done a couple of those, and the winner take all leagues, it's fun. It's fun, but it sucks when you've come in second or third place, and you don't get anything. It's really nice to get back some of that money that you put in there. And Jesse, we're all sweating with you, Steve. I mean, all year sweating this out, and Achan in the biggest game puts up like a goose. It was terrible, 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 terrible to have Tyler Huntley in there when it mattered. This is the only way. It realistically is, Joe. We talked about this, and for anybody out there that's looking at, to get our opinion about the game tonight, there's a very real expectation that I have with the Detroit Lions that if this game is anywhere in the market of, like, let's say 21-7 by the end of the second quarter, that they'll probably be making a decision in the locker room to shut a couple guys down. Mainly Gibbs, because there's nothing else behind him, and mainly probably Laporta as well. Goff, you could probably see come out too. Amon-Ra, J-Mo might stay in there because he's young and he's had some, growing pains and stuff. But there's a very real expectation that they could be putting on the pumping the brakes at least in the second half. I'm up by 75 with Gibbs and Bates left. My opponent has Amon-Ra. Safe to say I'm winning it, coming off 0-4 this season.
Love it.
This is the blessing, man. It's an absolute blessing to be up this much in a week that was absolutely insane. JT with another week going off. Jacobs with another week getting a touchdown. I mean, a lot of guys came through. A lot of guys let us down. I won, but I could have lost because I was trying to be cute by starting the Colts defense over the Bills defense. Note to self, don't start a trash defense, even though it's a good matchup. Jesse, we've talked about this almost all year. We talked about it on the show last week too. While the Colts was a good matchup on paper, the Colts have been letting quarterbacks go through them over the last several weeks. They've been getting some turnovers, but again, they've been allowing a lot of points and a lot of comebacks. And I said last week that I didn't think the Giants had it in them to put a comeback in. Well, they didn't have to come back. They were always in the lead, which was absolutely crazy in my mind to think that. But based off of what we were talking about last week, Joe, it wasn't something that was unusual, right? You had been on the Bills defense for the last 2 weeks, even after those poor performances against the Rams and the Bengals, and they carried people into championships. The past 2 weeks, the Bills had even more points yesterday, but they let the Jets score on the last 2 drives. One of those to Conklin. Props to Conklin. And Jesse, I don't know if this is happening. We talked on.
I hope he does too, but they're not going to give it to him, Jess.
You know, I really want Jared Goff. I really, really want Jared Goff to win MVP, but I don't think
they wanted to go to Lamar. I mean, the NFL was saying they want to go to Lamar. You can tell by the way they're doing their scheduling. I stand by it. Lamar Jackson won the MVP on Christmas. That complete dismantling of Houston, that was it.
Yeah,
it was over.
You know what was funny, Joe? I was going back and looking at because I was looking at everybody's championship teams going into this week to see who was winning, where those players were at, and I was going through that defensive conversation that we had. And one of the things that you said specifically about the Baltimore Ravens was that you thought that they were just going to lock up Houston, and that happened. I mean, Houston looked terrible.
Oh, yes, it did.
Going into the playoffs, it looks like they're either going to face the Steelers or the Ravens, and if they face the Ravens again, God help them.
They could be facing the Chargers.
And just want to talk about the Colts for a minute. How would you? I mean, George, you can talk about this as well. How do you feel going from potentially making the playoffs to getting sold out by the Giants of all teams, not even having a chance to compete in the playoffs? Terrible. Recon.
Well, I mean, the Colts' biggest problem is that they don't have a quarterback and they don't have an edge rusher, and their last 2 first-round picks were for a quarterback and for an edge rusher.
Yeah. Funny thing, Recon, about this. I was watching an Instagram reel about the front office when they were thinking about giving away Saquon Barkley, basically, and not making a deal to get him back on the team. And the one older guy in the front office was like, I won't be able to sleep if Saquon Barkley ends up on the Eagles. And now in the Week 18 game facing the Giants, he's got a chance to break the all-time rushing record. They've got to get it to him.
Just feels right, doesn't it?
Just like out of spite, they have to give him the all-time rushing record. I think it'll be super nice. And then all in one, in terms of the Raiders, I think if I remember correctly, you were deciding between like the Raiders and the Chargers. And the Raiders was a great play this week against Spencer Rattler. We were also talking about Seattle being a good play this week because Caleb Williams would sell. And speaking of Caleb Williams, Joe, what'd you think of that Thursday night game? I mean, Thursday night games have been either good or not good, weather related or not. And this game just led to a bunch of disappointment for a lot of people. Keenan Allen, JSN, Caleb Williams, Geno Smith, Zach Charbonnet. How did you feel about it?
I don't know why you guys are disappointed in Chicago not performing. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Standard is a standard. Although it wasn't a stupid score. Wasn't it like 19-3 or 19-13? 9-13?
No, it was like 6-3. It was gross. It was bad. It was bad.
Thursday was a long time ago for me, guys. Just being totally blunt.
Gozy, it feels. I mean, it sucks. I talked a little bit earlier about Achane. Last week he was the GOAT. This week, terrible circumstances for him. It was just one of those things that you hate to see because you have teams that are primed to win, and then Connor obviously injured, so he was taken out. Terry, I mean, what was that? Again, big prime. I think as a note, Joe, I think it will be really important to understand, never start Terry McLaurin when all eyes are on Terry McLaurin.
So we taking him off of our big board for playoffs?
No, I'm taking him off my big board. Like, I don't know, playoff best ball, I'll probably take Terry McLaurin. But, in terms of like Thursday night and Monday night games, like there's no way. I can't believe that he put up a similar score again this week, with Daniels just looking really, really good. Austin, I mean, he had 18 and 27 in full PPR. It's just Saquon didn't have the monster games he had seen before. And here's the thing: in DraftKings, he had about 20 points, so he basically kind of 2x'd his 2.4x his salary, something like that. But again, that's kind of what we were looking for this week out of Saquon. We weren't looking at like 45 points because Kenny Pickett was in. But Devonta Smith, Joe, your boy, put up a great game.
Coming back.
Everybody, Austin, I remember talking about your team. Everybody sold. I mean, DJ Moore, JSN, everybody. It's terrible. When teams are like that and you work so hard to get in there, I think it's an important thing starting week 16, week 15, somewhere along the lines, is start looking at some of those backups that could potentially play. I know a lot of people we put onto Amir Abdullah this past week. And then J.K. Dobbins came back, Joe. J.K. Dobbins came back.
He did.
Looked great. How do you feel about him for the playoffs?
Well, I need to know who they're going to play, because right now, if the Chargers win, the Steelers lose, they're going to Houston, in which case I love J.K. Dobbins.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're going to Baltimore, I don't.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to that final matchup and this week. And on that note, I think the NFL did a really good job. They tend to do this for the last week of the year. I think they did it better than most this year, putting Baltimore up first. Again, I believe they're doing that for Lamar to get the MVP, because Lamar will have to play in that game. And then with the Hard Knocks finale on Saturday night, the Steelers can knock out Cincinnati and end that thread that they've been putting on the show for the last month, which is what I think will happen. And I like overall where we're at in terms of this, but I don't like Dobbins. And I think it's going to be fundamentally just an issue for owning him in the playoff best ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a direction I want to go. I don't even think he's the best Charger to have. If I'm stuck with a Charger, I'm taking Herbert as a third quarterback, and that's about it. It's just a team I don't want to touch, because I not a chance in hell they're beating Baltimore.
Yeah.
The winner of Baltimore Buffalo will be in the Super Bowl.
Recon, we're going to come back to that. Steve, this right here is one of those things that always happens with the Joe Flacco effect. Okay. Joe Flacco is one of those quarterbacks that we as a fantasy community, he's a pure better passer than Anthony Richardson, and he makes his pass catchers better. But one of those things that is important to understand is that this matchup, people saw New York Giants and people saw, okay, let's go with them. And a lot of people, if you absorbed any content over the last week about DFS or anything like that, a lot of people were throwing out there as Josh Downs being one of the best plays at $4,800 on the slate for DraftKings, right? But if you go in and you look at the stats for this matchup, he actually had the worst matchup on paper because the Giants have such a terrible back end and a terrible rush defense that there's nothing that needs to go underneath for Josh Downs. So wherever those target shares were going, all of that was going to go to Pierce when healthy, and all of that was going to go to Pittman, and all of that was going to funnel into Taylor too. McMillan was our boy. Over the last 3 weeks, McMillan was our boy. And I think going into next year, Joe, it's going to be a really interesting thing talking about next year. It's going to be a really interesting situation looking at the Tampa Bay wide receivers, because one of the things you said in the offseason and one of the things you said earlier in the season was that there's a very real expectation that McMillan is going to take over Godwin's role at some point in time during this year, and that McMillan is going to pay dividends in the fantasy playoffs. Now, my question to you, as we go to this question and we go through the rest of as we go through the chat here, is how do you feel at this point in time in the season, going in and saying to yourself, I'm going to go into next year's draft with this specific wide receiver running back strategy? When you look at it and saying, okay, all of the value that I've gotten, and then ending up with Pickens and Flowers as my top 2 wide receivers, because that easily could have been something like, a Godwin or a BTJ, opening your eyes a little bit more to the whole picture of things. How do you feel as we go through the chat about having yourself set in a specific strategy to go in towards your draft in the coming season?
Well, you guys know me. I'm a running back whore. And I like to make sure that I have really 3, but at least 2 before the end of the 5th round. I've always loved doing that. The running backs tend to be the foundation of any roster that's going to be successful. So that's my starting point. It's interesting. I was already trying to figure out, which running backs would I want ahead of the various receivers, and already just trying to do like a quick outline for what next year's value would be. Obviously, way too soon to do any of that.
Right.
But I do like having a firm foundation of the running backs.
Right.
Mostly because there's so few full-time players. Most running backs are doing partial time. Obviously, the best with partial time is Gibbs, but so few of them are just constantly, you're getting it over and over and over again. So when I look at this, I look at it as saying, give me the 3 backs. And, quite frankly, it goes to show all of our best rosters for all of our longs were also in that same strategy. Granted, we nailed a lot of them when they were King Henry,
healthy,
Kyron, and then Monty.
And Chad,
but that gave us a starting point to win every league, even when
Chad,
the receivers went out.
For everybody in the chat, I'm really curious what you guys think. Who do you think the top 3 running backs off the board are? I have an idea of who I think is going to be the top 3 off the board. And put your pivot 4 in the chat. In about like 2 or 3 minutes, I want to get to that, Joe.
So for me, that's easy. Or you just want to wait on it.
But speaking of this one, tight ends until mid, after you've gotten your full roster is where we've always been at here on Local Football Flavor. We don't really like taking tight ends above that 4th round. We've tried it in a couple best balls this year. But usually
we did it in every best ball that was successful because we were right on Kittle.
When
we did our off season, there were only 3 tight ends worth having, and they ended up being right.
Kittle didn't go in the 4th round. Kittle was 5th or 6th rounds. So
Kittle was almost universally our 5th round pick.
Yeah, but not in the top 4. The reason why I say that top 4 rounds as being really important is because it's so pivotal that you have, those movable pieces. So you have a wide receiver, you have a running back, maybe you have 2 of the group. Maybe you want to go out and get one of those rushing quarterbacks. But what we've established this year is that more and more, it feels like the tight end market, outside of the years that we saw of Travis Kelce and outside of the years that we saw of Mark Andrews, the tight end market pretty much normalizes in that it can be very inconsistent to start the season. Rarely do we get consistency to start the season. And then as we get through the season, starting probably around like week 6 or week 7, we start to get more consistent results. And we've talked about this a lot, is that a good market to be in is that specific tight end capable of producing 10 plus PPR points a week, whether that comes through touchdown markets or whether that comes through volume, because that seems to be the floor of what puts most tight ends in most weeks in the top 10. And you want to have a top 10 if you're in a 10-team league, and you definitely want to have a top 10 tight end in a 12-team league. And so if you think about it and you ask yourself, okay, I just need a top 10 tight end with the potential for upside in a given week. Well, yeah, I'm going to wait for that, because any market that I pull from the top 4 rounds outside of Kittle, who projects, in the top 3 every single year, it would be not smart of me to go and chase that in the draft itself. And this is coming from a guy who chases tight end points constantly. You guys know that. And Jesse, Addison and McMillan look really good. I could definitely see Addison sneaking up into the top, probably the top 4 rounds going into next year, especially if they re-sign Sam Darnold. Now, if they're dealing with Daniel Jones or JJ McCarthy, that is something to consider. But Jordan Addison is a dog. He plays really well. He complements J. Jeff really well. And McMillan, Evans is getting older, but McMillan is a very good complementary wide receiver and very talented. And Baker trusts him a lot. And that Tampa team could be getting really good in the future. So I'm very curious where McMillan will land next year, Joe. It's very easily that you could see McMillan in that same conversation of where we saw Chris Godwin go this year.
No, I don't think it'll be that high. McMillan's not going to get that kind of love at all. He's not going to get pushed up that high.
Recon, I want to touch on that a little bit later. Carlos tuned in randomly during week 3 asking if I should trade Kyron. So welcome back, Carlos. I know you've been in a couple times here and there as well. But trading Kyron for a first and second plus Bucky, and we told you to take it. Most people at that time wouldn't tell you to take it. This is one of those trades that has worked for the community. Got a 24-point lead in the championship. He has Gibbs left. So, hey, Bucky, hopefully Bucky carries you to the
You got a fighting chance, my man.
Like I said, Gibbs could easily clean up the 20 points, but it's going to be a nail-biter. I'm rooting for you, Carlos. Rooting for you.
Welcome back, guys.
Dylan, this is to win $1,200. Full PPR. I'm currently in the lead by 49.2 exactly. My opponent has Gibbs and Jennings left, though. How do you like my odds? Hoping for a lower score here. All right, so let's get.
I think he gets it. I think he gets it. First off, 50 or 49.2. Sorry, to be specific, is a shitload of points. I mean, you would need Jennings to get you 3 touchdowns, and that's not going to happen. Gibbs is going to get his. Don't get me wrong. Gibbs is getting his. He's going to be in the 20s. That's fine. But Jennings is not doing the rest of it.
So if you figure comfortably, like if you high ceiling Jennings right now,
and high ceiling both of them, they don't get the 49.2.
Can you put him somewhere at six receptions, 90 yards, and a touchdown? That's
only 21 points.
You would still need to make up that 28 points somewhere else. And with Gibbs has the potential to get 28 points.
No, well, here's the potential too. Gibbs and Ahmad both ain't giving it. I mean, I think Gibbs is going to be the low 20s, and so is Ahmad. They're both not going to be in the high 20s. And I stand by it. I believe Ahmad's the bigger upside tonight.
I'm with you. I'm with you on Gibbs. I think that Gibbs is pretty comfortably in that kind of 20-point market. Over the last 2 weeks, he has put up 25 and 28, but that was on a good amount of receptions, and it might not be indicative that they're going to need to do that tonight. So I could see a lower volume in the passing game for Gibbs, somewhere in the market of like 4 targets. Less receptions and probably not a good amount of yards. But he's been a pretty consistent plus 15-point scorer for most of the season. I think 20 is a pretty safe floor. Now going back to this question that I asked Joe, Jesse believes Gibbs, Barkley, and Bijan in that order. How do you feel about the top 3 running backs this upcoming fantasy season?
I think Bijan's going to be number 1.
You think
I can make an argument that Bijan should be number 1 overall?
Make that
especially
argument.
With Penix.
I want to hear it. Make that argument because
they're going to throw the ball as much as they're going to check it down to Bijan.
Coming out,
London has shown pretty much he can't be what everyone said he was going to be, and every offseason report tried to force you into believing. Newsflash: London wasn't good then. London isn't good now. He might look fine on paper in his scouting report. He doesn't do the results you need to win a game. Bijan does. And when your career's on the line, aka this coach's is, if he survives this offseason, it's going to be very apparent. Just give Bijan the ball and stop throwing it. And that's what they're going to do. By the way, they are 90 minutes away from the university that proves that better than anyone else in the nation. Run the ball, and we can have below-average quarterbacking and make it work. That's what Georgia does. That's how Atlanta is. That's how they do it. So, therefore, it's Bijan or Gibbs is the debate for 1 and 2. I give the edge to Bijan. Saquon's going to be 3rd just for the simple fact of his age. I can see an argument for Saquon higher. I personally am putting him 3rd below her. It's for that reason I also don't have King Henry on this list. But that's how I would look at it. I probably have JT as my number 4. right now if I had to put
That's
it
what I
on.
was going to say. I was going to ask you, where do you have JT? Because realistically speaking, Jesse, these are my top three as well. And you know, if you were to sift through all of our off-season content, there was a conversation that I had with Joe, that I said that, you know, depending on how the tush push would work this year, I see that Saquon Barkley would be a top 3, top 2 running back. I can't find the exact episode where I said that. And Joe,
It's going to be one of the many ones where I drafted Henry instead of him.
yeah, because I was really vehemently against that. But anyway, what I
You
wanted to
were,
bring
and
up,
they
though,
ended up being 1 and 2.
what I wanted to bring up though about Bijan is what you mentioned earlier, where you said when they decided to make the decision not to allow Kirk Cousins to throw the ball in excess, you saw the production of Drake London go down, you know, not terribly much, but go down. And you saw the ascension of Bijan. Since week 6, Bijan has only had 2 games under 15 PPR points. Only 2. The loss at Minnesota and the loss at Denver, where they got shellacked. Every other game, he has been a plus 20-point scorer. And when I look at going into next year and looking at who I want a player in that vein of Saquon, or I want that player in the frame of Bijan, where it's a full-time role, and I'm getting usage in the passing game. I'm getting usage in I'm getting a lot of attempts, but also I have a ceiling that is 30 plus points, right? So if I'm looking at a running back in the first round, I need to be able to see a ceiling or a game script where they're going to be able to hit 30 plus points a game. All 3 of those guys listed right there, plus Taylor, who's already done it twice, 2 weeks in a row, have pathways where their best games are going to be above 30 points. And most of the other running back market, Joe, if we go in and look at some of these other running backs coming down here, realistically speaking, there are going to be conversations that people are going to have and say, why these 4 players? But it's going to be very easy to see that they're the best of the bunch that have that upside of 30 plus points. And especially when we consider that Michael Penix going into year 2 is going to be better than year 1 Michael Penix. This probably is going to be a very good situation to keep our eye on for fantasy purposes going into next year, don't you think?
You're 100% right. I mean, first off, it's just a great spot to be in. Yeah, there's nothing else around.
I mean, it's so good, and you look at and the other guys too, Joe. Going up here to what Recon. And
I do want to say this about Taylor though, because while it is a great spot to be on, it's about to get better because everyone in the world knows Richardson can't play quarterback, and he's not going to be their quarterback next year. If they are smart, which is a toss-up, he's either getting off the roster or he's getting moved to receiver. Because the guy is an incapable quarterback and the rest of the NFL knows it. So I look at it from that regards of saying it's going to be a good thing for all of the rest of the pass catchers in Indy once he gets moved on from.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to Taylor, but I do want to touch on this Trone. Props for holding your head up high, because I was going through your roster and I was just thinking to myself, these guys' performances were just straight duds. Aubrey with a 0, maybe even negative points in some leagues. JSN, Cup, McLaurin, all sub 6 points. Really hard to win, but those players were very logical decisions this week. Outside of Cup, I gave you a reason why I didn't like Cup this week. But these 3 guys are definitely going to be upwards, talking ahead for next year, Joe. Looking at it and saying, Cooper Kupp is still one of the better wide receivers in the league. Not sure what's going on over the past 3 weeks, but I'm very curious because
he could have aged out. Let's not discount it as a possibility. He could have aged out.
The biggest disappointments some of the bigger disappointments over the last several weeks have been Jaden Reed and Cooper Kupp. And my question to you about these 2 guys specifically is that they are still talented players, Reed being much younger and more explosive right now. But the question that I have is that when we're looking at wide receivers, props to getting second place though, Tron. That's still a really big deal. So congrats. Looking at it and saying, if you're going wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, what wide receivers do you feel are going to be available in the third round? And do you want to take any of them? Because there seems to be that there could be a decent amount of landmines in the third round upcoming. And, just spitballing here, a couple of guys that might be available in the third round. You're looking at potentially, a Jerry Jeudy, a Cortland Sutton, maybe Devontae Adams ages a little bit more without Rodgers, doesn't look as good. You have your Zay. Potentially Devonta Smith might grow up into there. How do you feel about third round wide receivers next year, knowing that a lot of the names on this list for Trone, JSN, Cup, and McLaurin might also end up in the third or fourth round and then dudded you out in the last couple of weeks? I mean, people are going to hold on to that. I mean, they're not going to forget it.
See, I think you're giving way too much credit for pushing people up the board too much. I don't think that's going to be the neighborhood of people you're going to get. I think you're going to get a much better crop of it. Obviously, the reason for this is that it's just so easy to forget all the other names. So if you're looking at a third round back or third round receiver, I mean, there's going to be
I was
Higgins
just pulling
will
a
still be
few
on the
up.
board. Pickens will still be on the board. Diggs will still be on the board. Way before the McMillans and all that you said would even come into consideration.
I didn't say McMillan. I said McLaurin.
Scary. I don't even think Scary Terry should be in the third round either. But
you got it.
I've always been against Scary Terry. And you can say it for better or worse, but he gives you these games that will give you upside, but not where he should be. Ladd is going to go in the fifth round. Ladd is amazing. I kept taking him in the ninth round all year. Guys, so we're going to be doing all our best balls, obviously, all of the summer long, especially whenever we don't have anything else to talk about. And come on and jump with them because we'll be doing them live. And I got to tell you, so many people give me crap for Ladd the entire season.
We're going to get
He's going to finish third in Rookie of the Year voting.
We're going to get on them early too, Joe. We're going to get on them as soon as
we're going to get on them a week after the NFL schedule comes out because that's when our programs start working.
Because here's the thing, and this is something that a lot of creators will also share to a different degree, but timing matters.
Oh yeah,
and so. There is a very likely, say you're in a best ball $1 million league. It is very likely that by June that team has already been drafted. And it is also equally as likely.
Well, for the longs in best ball, they tend to happen the first week in August.
So one of the things to keep in mind is that player value changes depending on injuries, depending on situations, depending on coaching. And we do know that some coaching changes are going to take place. One of the biggest, in my opinion, is what's going to happen in Detroit. With Ben Johnson being one of the best OCs in football, you've got to ask yourself, if he leaves, what kind of mark does that leave, or what kind of deficit does that leave Detroit in? And what kind of market does it put the other team in? Let's say Ben Johnson goes to Chicago, which I don't think he will. If he does that mean that we want to put those players up a little bit more? I doubt that. But at the same point in time, I think drafting, one of the things that Joe and I mentioned earlier in the offseason as well, is looking at where these coaches come from, right? And so as we look ahead towards next year for many people, one of the things to keep your eye on is how will these coaching changes affect quarterback performances, right? So will this be, we talked about Herbert a lot in the offseason, Joe. He was one of our quarterbacks that we wanted to target. Didn't turn out to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but also kept the turnovers down and led to a really, really, really solid performance from Ladd McConkey. Looking at a full PPR league, again, going to Fantasy Pros and just going over the course of the whole season, Ladd came out as the 12th receiver. The 12th receiver, and he was going off somewhere in that 14th round. Just taking a look at the top 12 wide receivers of this past year: Jamar, Jefferson, Amon-Ra, BTJ, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Jackson Smith, Terry McLaurin, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Jerry Jeudy, Ladd, Evans, Adams, and Sutton were the top 15. You take a look at those names and you say, well, of course, the top 4 out of the top 5 were drafted in the first round. That makes a really good case to take a wide receiver in the first round. But for all of the good cases we can make for that, then you see BTJ, Malik Neighbors, JSN Terry, Drake London, Judy, McConkey, Mike Evans, Adams to say, well, maybe I should pump the brakes on wide receiver in the first round. How do you feel about that?
Well, go through the running backs that didn't go in the first or second round that ended up any good. Because I'm pretty sure the only one you're going to find is Chase Brown.
Do you say that again? Repeat that question.
Aside
again.
From running backs that went in the first and second round, who else finished in the top 10? I think it's going to be Bucky and Chase Brown, and that's going to be it.
You got Josh Jacobs. He was being drafted in the 3rd or 4th round for some people. He was 6th. You have Kamara. He was 8th, but obviously didn't do anything on the back end of the season.
No, he didn't.
James Cook was 9th. He was being drafted in the 3rd or 4th round. Chase Brown was being drafted, 10th, 11th round?
Ballpark, yeah.
James Conner was being drafted in about, 6th, 7th round. He was 11th. And then you had Chuba, Mixon, Aaron Jones, and Bucky. Those guys were the top 15. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them being drafted outside of the top, or 9 of them being drafted outside of the top 2 rounds. So there's but the splits on them in terms of where their amount of points are at. If you go from where the 10th is and you take Saquon out of the conversation because he's having, one of the best seasons of a running back all time, and you say, okay, I'm going to compare the 11th spot to the 2nd spot, which is Bijan. Bijan's at 310 and James Conner's at 253. So it's a difference of about 60 points. I'm also taking Jamar out of there because he's having an all-time season as well. And going to the number 2 wide receiver and the number 11 wide receiver. So Jerry Jeudy's at 228 and Justin Jefferson's at 309. So that's a difference of about 80-ish points. So there is a conversation to be had that if you own one of those top spots in a league next year, that you have to go wide receiver, that you won't have a choice because the market is going to dictate that that's the smart play to make. How do you feel about that?
I think you have to go running back. I mean, again, we'll dive into this all off season long. And the one thing that was with our charts last year was that we had really valued some guys that no one else was valuing. King Henry at the top of that list. And it really dictated our draft, and it really worked out. The fact that we loved Ladd so much last year pretty much is why I don't think we had any Jamar on our team, because we kept going running back early. Now, granted, we were wrong saying that Bryce Hall was going to be better than Bijan, but overall, we were correct we were correct on 80% of it, and that's why we were able to get so many teams into the second and third round relative to the amount of entries we did. So, like I said, we're very excited for where we're at, but it's hard to do this without seeing A, where consensus is at, and B, where our rankings are. So much of it is we trust our numbers because our numbers are normally right.
Austin, this sucks, man. I always look at these. I always look at this and looking at possible projections here. There was no stretch of the imagination where this team should have put up 37 points. I mean, there was no conversation in my mind that I would have projected any of these players to put up the season that they did, or the games that they did this past week, outside of maybe the Colts defense. There's a good chance that Garrett Wilson is not on the Jets next season. If Aaron Rodgers is there, Garrett Wilson will not be. And I got to ask,
that's 100% correct. But Rodgers isn't going to be there, so it doesn't matter.
If Rodgers stays, where could Garrett Wilson land? And how would that affect your value of Garrett Wilson? Because I know you and you know me. We don't value Garrett Wilson as high as his end of year projection or end of year outcome was at 9. And he was being drafted as the 10th or 11th player off the board this year.
Yeah, he was going to draft receiver 5. Yeah, so obviously I wasn't on Garrett Wilson, but a big reason I wasn't on Garrett Wilson was the Rodgers
But
facts.
but outside of a couple of games, he's been, league average in terms of most things. So I mean, you're
Yeah,
not.
but he also had Adams. Like it was a weird. So we're talking about just strictly the offseason perspective on Wilson.
Yeah, where do you think he lands if he goes?
Quite frankly, anywhere. Because he is a top 10 talented receiver.
Mhm.
His position just sucked. With who he was with, it was Rodgers was the problem. So when I look at this,
Truthfully, Austin.
he's incredibly talented. He can be an upgrade in almost every team. It's just gonna be a question of who wants to cut the first round to get.
All right, I'll list this. So this comes from an article by Fansided, and
right.
I'm gonna read you teams, and these are teams that could potentially cut the check because they have the draft capital to do so.
All right.
Okay. Patriots.
I can see them doing it. I hate them there, and they're also not going to trade internally in the division. The Jets won't.
Okay.
They're not even that stupid.
Next one. Denver.
They would do it, and they should do it.
If he were to go to Denver,
if he goes to Denver, he's a second round pick. I can tell you that right now.
All right. Next one. Commanders.
First round pick, no doubt.
Steelers.
He will never come to the Steelers. If he does, he should be a fourth round pick because they'll ruin him.
Okay. All right. I dig it. So if he goes to Denver, it's a blessing with Bo Nix, is what you're saying. I like that. Something tells me Wilson goes to the Chargers, Commanders. How do you feel about the Chargers? Recon mentioned the Chargers here. Do you think they go?
If he goes to the Chargers, it's an upgrade for him and Ladd. They become 1 and 2. Ladd will never go in the second round, but he will have a second round value. And Garrett Wilson would remain a back end first round.
What do you think a team is going to have to give up for a guy like Garrett Wilson? A first rounder pick and a plethora of picks?
I think it's just the first. I mean, he only has 1 year left on his contract, so that's going to limit him. But I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots obviously are in the best position if they decide to trade down out of that. If they decide to trade out of that spot, that definitely puts the Jets in a situation where they could go after a quarterback outside of Aaron Rodgers. That is something that could happen. I want to look at the NFL draft and see where the Chargers are ranked. Because looking at the draft order, they're in the playoffs, so they're sitting down pretty low, and they might not. I don't know. They might not give that up. I'm not too sure about that, but we'll see. We'll see on that one. If Wilson is in Denver, the Commanders or the Chargers, he will be a second rounder for sure. I mean, absolutely. The kid is very talented. I mean, it's the same conversation that we've had multiple times about a guy like T. Higgins too, where when you have such a talented player and you either have, an alpha above you or a quarterback situation that is unnerving in a Garrett Wilson situation, it definitely affects your value. So, I mean, if T Higgins was on a different team with good quarterback play, I mean, if T went to Denver, does T become a second round, third round pick? Do you think?
T Higgins in Denver, yeah. You might not go that high, just to be blunt, but yeah, he should. I love where he's at.
Yeah,
I love T Higgins as a player. I probably overvalue him because I think he's a top 5 talent. Mm-hmm. No one else thinks he's that high. I love him. His wingspan, his size. I love Higgins. I think. Let me put it this way: everywhere we just said Garrett Wilson would go, I would give Higgins at least the same rating. Mm-hmm. I think he's a better version. He's also an older version of Garrett Wilson.
Because, I mean, here's the thing.
Because he's not older, isn't he? He's physically the same age.
So if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not, because this comes from Sport Track, that McLaurin could opt out of his next contract, find bigger money if he wants, because his deal was only 3 years with an opt-out. If he comes back for 2025, he'll be 30. And there's a very real expectation that you can make with the Commanders that he's not as valuable to the Commanders as a younger Garrett Wilson could be. So you might have it that if Garrett Wilson leaves the Jets this year and is traded away, maybe Terry McLaurin could be part of that deal. They get younger. He's going to be 25 next year. That's 5 years difference. If he's with Jane Daniels, that could be nasty, Joe. That could be real nasty without Terry McLaurin there too. And the Chargers situation, like you said, just makes sense. I mean, they need an alpha wide receiver on the outside. That boosts the value of J.K. Dobbins. That boosts the value of Herbert. They still have an identity. I mean, that's just, man, it's got me all like in my feels about potentially getting Garrett Wilson in the second or third round, because people are going to fade him. People are going to fade him really, really hard. I mean, and justifiably so. But they're going to fade him really hard, and he could be had at like a really good value this upcoming year. And as we pivot into into next year and into the fantasy best ball here, do we want to hop into a best ball draft? See how we do.
Now?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's hop in. Let's get into one, put it on the screen. But I think a couple of players, Joe,
fired on up.
I think a couple of players that I'm really interested in going into next year is, where is Puka going to be at? Puka is going to be, I think, a top 10 player this year.
Puka's going top 5.
Puka is definitely going.
I think he's going to be top 5.
Has anybody ever seen that Justin Jefferson?
I mean, again, we'll have it all comes out, because we use a lot of different metrics that go into our math.
Love it, Raycon. Love it,
we
Jesse.
Just get cut off here.
No, we didn't get cut off. We're still here. But yeah,
sorry,
I think
loading here.
When I was watching TV today with my son, who's currently crying right now, and seeing athletes in commercials, they always have to wear their jerseys and stuff because nobody knows who they are. If Justin Jefferson wasn't wearing his jersey, I doubt most people wouldn't know who he was. It's always like that.
Well,
it feels good. Basketball being main sport. How do you feel about Oklahoma City Thunder there, Austin? Shea is a beast. Love Shea. Yeah, other guys that I'm looking at, Joe, for first rounders next year, Nico's most likely going to be a first rounder. If I get the 101, Puka's my pick. No second thought about it, CC. That is the type of gusto that a league needs, because he put up in limited time this year, Joe, almost 1,000-yard season with, I mean, the guy is a beast. I mean, he is matchup proof. Stafford's getting him the ball regardless of situation. You come in and just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 full games. In 10 full games, he was the 21st wide receiver in the league, 205 points. He plays in 3 more games, he's automatically top 5. Puka is going to be top 10, 100%. Tyreek Hill is most likely going to fall out of the top 10, in my opinion. Nico is going to probably go into that first round as well. Maybe in the second round, how people feel about the running back situations. Marv is definitely falling, most likely to the third round. Let's see here. Who else do we have here? Because, I mean, the player pool is really interesting. You have younger guys. You have a bunch of older guys. You mentioned Diggs a little while ago, Joe. I'm not sure how people are going to value Diggs moving forward.
I'm not sure how they're going to value him either, to be totally blunt with you. But we can't just forget about Diggs. He's going to be getting the ball and all that.
KD is one of my favorite basketball players of all time, Austin. Beast of Texas. It's just so unfortunate what happened to his hairline. I mean, he just looks ridiculous. I mean, he truthfully does. KD's a phenomenal baller, but I mean, his hair is not where it's at. They do. Super talented. They're a super talented team. And speaking of talent, they have, and this is across sport now here, Joe. But speaking of doing it right with draft picks, we see so many NFL teams doing things wrong with their draft picks. I think one of the things that is really
It's
good to
amazing.
know
It's going to be the same 10 teams.
about Oklahoma City is like they built up their draft pick reservoir for years, and now it's paying dividends. And you see teams like that in baseball sometimes, but rarely in the NFL do you see it like that. Would you still put Puka?
Well, there's some pretty good reasons for that, though, why you don't see in the NFL.
If Stafford retires, Joe, do you still see Puka as a top 5?
No.
What quarterback
I
would have to
Stafford
get there?
retiring, but
what quarterback would have to get there in order for you to see Puka in the top?
What do you mean
5?
if Stafford does retire?
Yeah.
If Stafford retires, they will blow their load to get Darnold, and I'd be okay with that.
Oh, Darnold and Puka could look real nice together. Really nice. I mean, you could also make a case that they could go out there and get JMO and get a backup. We got to question how long Dak is going to be around in Dallas. I know they signed a contract a little while ago.
Dak will be in Dallas for 1,000 million years. That's how that contract was written.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. Chase is Burrow dependent and will not repeat this year's production. And JJ is quarterback proof, but his primary defense assignment. Puka's unstoppable because he's too difficult to guard to McVay. Honestly, he really is. I mean, looking at all those wide receivers, Jamar is hard not to draft 101 overall, but the pivot to Puka is what's going to make your team really different. Looking at where Puka is going to land, he's definitely going to be top 5 wide receiver off the board, in my opinion. Joe, you're up there as well, believing in that. You could potentially see CeeDee Lamb slip a little bit. You're definitely going to see Tyreek Hill slip a little bit, and nobody's going to have the balls to take BTJ in the top 10. But he's definitely going to be a second round wide receiver, regardless of quarterback situation. Recon. I traded for Tyreek by giving Kyron, but that wasn't a bad trade at the time. I mean, Tyreek coming back, and Tyreek still put up some good numbers this year. And Kyron, as we've seen, is very, very volume dependent. Had a really good year, but still volume dependent. The back end of the year was really nice for really nice for Kyron. But Tyreek with Tua is still lethal. He can't throw an accurate deep ball anymore, and he's underthrows them. That's what Joe's been saying for years. Joe's been saying that for years. He forces it to Hill to slow him down. Yeah, I mean, his ADOT's really low. They've kind of caught on to what they need to do to stop Tyreek Hill, and everybody has caught on to that, and most teams will game plan against that. We saw Tyreek Hill be successful this past week with Huntley. Granted, not what we want out of a top 5 player, and I think that's what's going to definitely ding Tyreek Hill in the future here.
Mm-hmm.
Chase could be next year's CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb still had a good enough year on a whole, but when you take his per game splits, it was rough during some certain points here. He did have a 30-point game, but the back end, even with Cooper Rush, Joe, these last 3 weeks with a healthy CeeDee Lamb, that was good. I mean, so you don't really want 21. You want that 30-point upside again out of your wide receivers. But again, kickers. I mean, Jason Sanders has been the most consistent Miami player this year, CC. So I laugh about it because Joe hates kickers. I'm interested now. Who has scored the most points on Miami? So Jason Sanders has 158 fantasy points. Devon Achane has 281. So obviously it's Achane.
Bob, we have 2 going at the same time. I got it going here.
I get 214.
Get ready.
I love that. Put it up on the screen because I can't see it. I think the order goes Jamar, Saquon, Bijan, Jefferson, Amon-Ra, and then I don't know the rest. I mean, I could see that. I think Puka goes top 5, like I said. I think that you could also see CeeDee Lamb up there as well. You know, the running back room, people pivot away from running backs so much in best balls and so much but less so, less so in home leagues. Saquon, Bijan, Gibbs, H.
All right, Bob, we got the first pick overall. I'm going Lamar.
All be in the first round. Hey, Michael. I have Gibbs and Bates.
Bob, first pick overall. I'm going Lamar.
That's bold of you not to go Josh Allen.
Feeling Lamar, man.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Michael, down 26.3. I have Gibbs and Bates. He's done. What do you guys think? We talked a little bit about this. We think that Gibbs has a really comfortable floor of about 20. So, you can walk yourself into any ways about that. The only thing that might not give Gibbs 20 is if he gets less receptions, which could also happen tonight. Bates is kind of like the inverse. So if Gibbs is successful, there's a good chance that he gets a touchdown. So you won't need as much from Bates. What you need Bates to not do is the thing that the announcers say. You don't want him to do something erratic, right? Like what Brandon Aubrey did this past week. So I will say that I think that Bates probably slots you in for at least 6 points. That's going to be probably 3 extra points and a field goal. And then you can get the other 20.3 from Gibbs probably pretty easily, Michael. So we're doing a best ball playoff draft here. And one of the things to note here is that it's going to be important to get some stacks. This opens the door to a likely Andrews, so we don't have to hit the tight end super early. Obviously, we can't get Derrick Henry now, which is really not that bad. I think here, Joe, I think it'd be smart to go after a quarterback from the NFC. If the best one if there's a good one available to us. If not, pivot into trying to get one of the better running backs out there right now.
So right now, as we look at this here, get all my settings here correct, because we have drafts going on like crazy everywhere. But focus on the one on the screen that we got here. We look at the ADP. It'd be Cook, Allen. How about this one, Aaron Jones? You good with that?
Maybe. Yeah, I can see that. Aaron Jones
we can't get to the problem we got into before, which is taking ever to pick.
Aaron Jones or Kyron, either one.
Taking both then.
I also like Josh. Yeah, Josh Jacobs doesn't really have a chance to advance, though.
No, Josh Jacobs. Well, Cook does. So we could take Cook here and kind of hedge
Cook might get the bye.
Cook's definitely not getting the bye, but Mahomes already clinched it.
I like Cook. because he's not going to run into the Ravens defense or the Chiefs. So that benefits him.
Hey, Buffalo's going to play Baltimore in the second round, Bob.
Say that again?
100%. Buffalo and Baltimore are playing in the second round. Kansas City's the 1 seed. No doubt.
I thought they stopped restacking it. I thought they didn't restack it. I thought whoever is the 5 seed.
No, they 100% restack. So the 2 and 3 will play each other in the second round.
Okay, so that's Buffalo. So, all right. Well, if Buffalo and
Baltimore play each other in the second round.
If the Steelers win, we're trying some different things.
I don't
here.
see a no, because if Baltimore wins, they get the 5 seed. They get the 3 seed.
Yeah, if they win, they get the 3 seed.
Just where it is.
We're kind of by taking Lamar, what we're betting for here, Joe, in the chat. By taking Lamar, what we're betting for is that they get the matchup against the Chargers, which would probably be one of those games that they could easily feast in. And then coming up, you're taking Buffalo, who does not have, the best pass defense. We've seen that in a couple of games. Lamar can definitely run on the ground, which also takes away the pivot there. I like that. I like that kind of combination there. We do want to get a wide receiver in here, Joe.
Addison it's going to be Addison and Puka.
Okay, interesting. Why you think the Rams are going to beat the Commanders?
Yeah. And I also think that Minnesota has a chance of being in the Super Bowl. This has become the Minnesota's in the Super Bowl team, Bob.
Okay. So Minnesota's, we want to get a couple of Ravens players in there as well, but they're a little lower back end kind of players. So I'm okay.
And
with
Darnold
waiting.
will be the next pick to give us the complete Minnesota stack.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm just going through a couple of things. I'm around to get very heavily limited to 13 points, and I need Laporta to go for 10 receptions, 100 yards. Hey, it's always nice, Recon, to hope for something like that, because stuff like that can always happen. And Pickens and Flowers, yeah, I mean, that was just a shame. All right.
Well, that sucks losing there.
I'm curious about the Puka call out, though. I mean, there goes Jane Daniels. You need to get another quarterback, Joe. You only have one.
I'm seeing that.
That's why I said that one of those wide receiver situations should have been a quarterback. So the only one left is Love on the NFC side or Baker, but Baker might not even make it. Stafford's left. Yeah, I just don't see that. I don't think this has a very good shot.
Yeah, but you know what, Bob? We're going to go for it. We're going to do a Ram stack because we already got Puka. If we can get Stafford and Kyron, we're going to do both.
And there goes Kyron. That's okay, though. Looking up here, we still have a chance at Bateman and Likely, which would be nice for a Raven stack.
So Stafford and Bateman then. I never thought I'd get you to do that.
Yeah. I mean, Stafford's a must pick because the quarterback's coming out.
I'm good with Bateman. We need to get someone to be with Lamar.
Yeah.
And then just going through the roster hence far, we have two backs.
Here's
two
the
receivers. So I want to get another back on this team.
Here's the reason, Joe, in the chat for our conversation to have about the fantasy playoff best ball here. Looking into it, we want to have at least two chances here. So typically speaking, we want to have a chance from the AFC and a chance from the NFC. So we want to go into the last round. So there's a couple different ways you can play it. You can play it where you're playing just to win the wild card, which in fact we have wild card or not wild card. Did you have the first round teams? The second conversation to have is we want to have someone that has the chance to be in the Super Bowl, and we have two chances, so two quarterbacks potentially to get into the Super Bowl there.
Yeah, this team's basically built up for Baltimore and the Rams to be in the Super Bowl. Possible, not likely, but it's possible.
But again, not having the running backs from those teams definitely limits us. So in the next draft, you've got to play the running back situation a little bit better because we have two offset running backs that doesn't necessarily help us too much. There you go. There's some running backs that are coming off the board there.
So I'm thinking Justice Hill and Isaiah Likely.
Interesting. I think it's weird, but okay.
I think it's weird, but okay. Dude, Super Bowls get weird. Weird people score.
Yeah, because if Tampa, all right, who plays the number one seed there?
The number one seed we're gonna buy.
Right. But if Tampa plays Minnesota, that's going to be a rough matchup for Bucky. But if Tampa plays Detroit, that's going to be a good matchup for Bucky. Jacobs has a tough matchup against Philly. I'm just trying to think of us in my head here as you wind this one down.
I think Bucky will be the last pick to get us through the first round, though.
Yeah, we just don't have a running back. We just don't have the right correlation, Joe. Going in there. We don't have.
Well, we had too much panicking going on early, Bob. Too much panicking going on early.
I know you were panicking because you put up two at the same time.
Well, we were the turn.
Yeah, but never panic. Never panic. Correlation.
Well, there was 3 seconds left, Bob, and I remember the offseason when you would yell at me for someone in my queue getting picked when you didn't want them to.
Correlation is good. I'm not.
Lad.
I want correlation. You know what's crazy though is that. If the Bengals,
what do you think about throwing Cup in his last pick? Just go all in on the passing game of of the Rams. Because if they go, that's not a bad thing to carry you.
No.
You'd rather have Bucky?
How many running backs do you have?
2. Oh, we definitely need a running back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you can set yourself up because
at least we know Bucky's playing in the playoffs. We also could go with Najee or Warren.
Nah.
I think they're getting the second round though. I think they'll beat Houston.
Yeah, but
it's either Bucky or Warren in my mind. Those are the 2 that I'd consider. Which one do you want?
Say that again.
It's either Bucky or Warren. Those are the who this picks between.
I mean,
I don't think Bucky beats Minnesota.
No. It all depends on
I think Pittsburgh beats Houston, so I'm going to go with Warren. Give me 2 games out of him.
Okay. I mean, that works. I don't like I think that there needs to be a good correlation between the running backs and to give us a full chance at a full roster. What we're going to need here, as to Joe's point, what we're going to need here to happen is we're going to need to have the Rams run the table. In order to have a mostly full lineup, we'll need the Rams and the Ravens to run the table, which isn't bad.
No, there's worse than that.
That has a really good chance of popping off, because the likelihood that, say, the Steelers would make it through Kansas City is not really high. But at least you get those 2 games out of him. You're probably gonna get 2 games out of Buffalo. So that's a good point to start at. You're going to get 2 games out of the Ravens at the very minimum.
And Rams Green Bay is that's a toss-up game right now.
Yeah, it depends on where it's played.
I mean, Green Bay. No correction. It'll be in LA. I said that wrong. Sorry, it'll be in LA. They won the division.
Though. Green Bay has a really good defense.
They have a defense. I'm not sure it's a really good defense.
It's good. It's good towards the end of games. And Jacobs kind of. And the thing that I'm curious about is, while I don't think that. See, I like Jacobs, but I just don't think that Green Bay gets past Philly. And looking at that first round, Joe, I like
Green Bay wouldn't have Philly.
Well, Green Bay's currently sitting as the 7th seed.
Oh, I have them projected as the final 6th seed, and Philly Washington.
Right now they're projecting as the 7th seed.
Yeah, but they have the same record, so we'll see how that shakes out.
Well, that changes a lot of things. So if the Rams face off against Green Bay, I think that is a better matchup for Josh Jacobs, and Green Bay could push themselves to win that game against the Rams. But with the Rams facing off against the Commanders, I think that's also a better matchup for Puka.
All right, 6th spot, Bob. When I'm sitting in the 6th, I'm hoping for the Philly turn, although I can't guarantee it.
I mean, I agree with you, CC. Cup is kind of dead to me. Zay's kind of dead to me right now, too.
I either want the Philly or Detroit turn, Bob. That's what I want here at the 6th pick.
It sucks when that happens, CC, that you hit up and you're like, oh, the consolation bracket is scoring crazy, like, low, and you're going off. It is a lot of luck. You can't say that, we were all expecting, Ford to hurt his ankle or to have JSN score one of his worst games in the year. There is a bit of luck and circumstance to it, but it's very much, all fantasy, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, there's that there's always the analytic mindset that you go into it taking your best opportunities. So coming down here, Joe, we're going to be probably left with some running backs.
Bob, we're either doing the Philly turn or the Detroit turn.
Yeah, I think
we're either doing Jalen and Saquon, or we're not doing that, so we're doing Gibbs and Ahmad.
You don't want to go to quarterback? You don't want to go Goff?
Well, yeah, the problem is these quarterbacks go so damn early.
I mean, I don't disagree with you that I like Gibbs and Amon-Ra.
The problem if we go Gibbs and Ahmad is we have to basically go all in on Wild Card Weekend.
Well, yeah, you could. You can.
I mean, the other picks have to be all in on wild card weekend because these guys are going to get the bye.
Do you want to go Gibbs and Amon, or do you want to get?
I do want to go Gibbs and Amon. I'm just telling you the challenge of what I just put us in. Our next two picks are both going to have to be
completely Michael. McBride finally with a touchdown this week, paying off. I remember. I think it was George went out and got McBride as well. I think it's tougher here, Joe, because I feel like there's better offense. I feel like there's better offense on the NFC bracket for the playoffs. Like that could make some noise. Like Washington could make some noise. The Rams could definitely make some noise. So stacking the Lions is definitely a tough bet. They're going to leave us with
Jared. Stacking the Lions is how you get a chance to win the Super Bowl.
Here's the thing. They're going to leave us with Jared Goff, most likely, because they see that they can't stack the best two players from that team.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
So if we take Goff, if we have a chance to take Goff and Laporta, I think that that's not a bad decision to make.
Just go all in on it. All right.
But again, we might not get out of the first round if Detroit.
Well, we also don't have to take the tight end.
You don't have to. Yeah, in underdog, you don't have to. That's right.
So
Gibbs to the moon. A lot of championships. It always seems to come down to that. All the championships coming down to today's game, which is crazy.
Dude, Bob, is there any reason to think Pacheco
if Laporta does go off?
If Laporta does go off, he's not a wild card winner.
What'd you say?
We might have to do Kyron and Goff.
Kyron and Goff?
Yeah.
I don't really like taking another running back from the NFC, to be honest with you.
All right, so here's the AFC ones left. Mixon, Hunt,
I don't like
Hill,
that either.
Dobbins.
All right, take Goff.
Oh, Goff just went.
Okay, Goff just went. He went with two quarterbacks. That sucks. Okay. See you, Recon. Good luck. I mean, yeah.
So according to this, the two top-rated players left are Kelsey, Shakira, Worley, and Andrews. None of them are doing it for me.
Yeah, got sniped. Yeah, none of them are doing it for me. Yeah, I don't know, Joe. It's up to you on this one. I think you can go with your Rams if you think they got a chance. You can go with Minnesota if you think they have a chance. I mean, just kind of back up where we're at here. You can say Jefferson and Darnold, and then we can just play around with the AFC as it lies.
That was a waiver pick, Bob. You took too long to give me your feedback. All right. I think we need to take
Jefferson wasn't there, so he's going to want to take Darnold here.
Yeah, so I'm taking him first.
Yeah. So CC, as it goes with this mindset, if I get the player spare available on the best team, but why strategically aim to do this? So the idea here is that when you're looking at this Super Bowl best ball, playoff best ball, is that you've got to make it out of the first weekend. You absolutely have to make it out of the first weekend. Insofar as that's true, you also have different mindsets to play. Are you playing to just win a little bit of money, or are you playing to win the championship? Because realistically speaking, you will most likely have to have a full roster going into the championship game. You will have to have a full roster going into the championship game. So where the viewpoint is that you can, if you're building, you could take a couple players here and there to get you out of the first weekend, but ideally you want to take who you think the champion is going to be. So you would want to have at least a couple, stack an NFC team and stack the AFC team that you think is going to make it, rather than just taking and hitting and hoping against all those other kinds of things and happening. So far, what's going to happen, though, is Joe and I are going to be screwed on the AFC side.
Yes, we are.
Because we don't really see any value in the AFC.
Here's the problem with the AFC in general. What Bills receiver do you want? What Chiefs receiver do you want? Aside from what Baltimore receiver do you want?
We lost out on Addison there.
We did.
So we have an unstacked Sam Darnold, which doesn't really help us at all.
It doesn't. This lineup's going to require a home run, Bob.
So
and
Joe,
I'm about to take that swing.
Do you want to take a home run on Jaden Daniels?
I'm going a different direction on a home run.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to be sniping a lot of people, so you have to be ready to pivot at a moment's notice. Maybe Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey here.
That's exactly where I'm going.
Yeah. I mean, they could beat Baltimore. If they face Baltimore, they could definitely beat the Steelers.
They would be placing they're playing either Baltimore or Houston. I definitely think they beat Houston.
So take Herbert, take Ladd, and then take Dobbins.
Yeah, we'll see if we get Dobbins on a comeback.
I mean, it gives us a gross stack, but if they end up going for by any chance of the imagination,
he is a Super Bowl coach.
And
we got what, Kaepernick to the Super Bowl.
If Hawkinson hasn't gone yet, Hawkinson could be a nice Darnold. And here's the thing, CC. Ideally, you want to be able to foster a whole lineup. So as I said to Joe in the chat earlier, is the dynamic is that if you have at least one AFC team and one NFC team, and like Joe was like, well, why take two quarterbacks there? Well, there's a chance that one of them does poorly, one of them does fine, but you have two chances at quarterback instead of just one. Mm-hmm. As it goes for the other positions, like say you believe that the Chiefs and the Commanders are going to get in, taking both those quarterbacks and taking weapons from those teams is really good. And, and you can bounce around a little bit, but you don't want to take all AFC players and all NFC players, because then you're limiting yourself in case, if you only have one running back going in, you're not going to really make any noise by any stretch of the imagination there. Well, there goes Hawkins.
Well, the Hawk going, that makes it rough.
Yeah, that's not a blessing.
We'll throw that tight end from that Disley. We'll throw QJ in.
So take Dobbins here, Joe.
Yeah, for sure.
Take Dobbins.
Is Monty coming back for the playoffs, by the way?
I don't know. And then who's our other running backs?
Scary Terry, I think, is the next pick.
Yeah.
It's Daniels. I'm going to go Jay and Daniels. I'm taking 3 quarterbacks.
That's stupid. I don't like that.
Scary Terry, then. All right, so here's our roster right now, Bob. Darnold and Herbert at quarterback.
Yeah.
Running backs, Gibbs, Kyron, and Dobbins. Receivers, Ahmad, Ladd, and Terry. It's a great regular season lineup.
So tell me who our potential Super Bowl lineup would be.
Well, right now, the ideal one it's Chargers, Detroit, I think, is our ideal one.
Chargers and Detroit gives us a full lineup if that were to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's possible.
It's there's no backups in that lineup, but it is a lineup.
Yeah. How many rounds do we have left?
Looks like we got 2 rounds left.
Who are the best players available on the board in the best situations?
Kincaid, Goddard. We can go Cooper. We can go Cup to try to go off the Rams make a run.
That gives us a wide receiver. Yeah, we don't have any Chiefs, CC. Because they've all been taken. Chiefs. They've all been taken. It's really hard in these playoff best balls to really get a bunch of Chiefs guys. And we went with the Herbert, so there's a good chance that we loaded up on 3 players from the Chargers. So this lineup's probably not going to make it very far.
This lineup's all dependent upon the Chargers. I mean, if the Chargers get out of the first round,
it's more out of necessity there. It's more out of necessity there than anything else. Who's still left from the NFC side? You said Cup.
Cup, Goddard. I don't want to touch Goddard though. I don't want to take Jamar Chase. I don't want to take Bijan.
Well, take Bijan in. Bijan in the off chance that we have a lot of those NFC running backs. That's the 3. I don't know. I don't like it either.
I'm going Cup and QJ. I'm just riding the pattern we went with and going all in on it.
That's fair. So ideally for this lineup to work, we would want Chargers and Lions in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, the Chargers are in the Super Bowl. Here are the Chargers from our roster: Herbert, Dobbins, Ladd, QJ. We have the Chargers.
And then on the opposite side, we'd have Amon-Ra and Gibbs.
Yes.
Okay, I mean that's not bad, but the Chargers are probably aren't going to make it that far.
Well, here's the fun fact about the Chargers: they have the second best defense of all the playoff teams. Again, he's a coach. He's a coach who's been to the Super Bowl before.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I'm not writing off because again, they could beat Baltimore. They could beat Baltimore. Then they do have a chance against the Bills. I mean, heck, the Bills aren't guaranteed to win. I mean, let's be honest.
I think Baltimore would beat Buffalo, but I think Buffalo would beat basically anybody else.
So this year, the Ravens played the Chargers. The Ravens won 30-23. The game was
in LA, wasn't it?
It was in LA.
Hey, we're not neglecting anyone's comments, are we?
No. The Ravens ended up winning in the fourth quarter of that game. Ladd went 6 for 83. Dobbins was 6 for 40. Herbert went for 218 yards, no touchdowns.
All right, Bob, third pick in this one. We're taking one of the three stud quarterbacks. We're either taking Lamar, Jackson, or either Allen, Jackson, or Hurts. They're all playing wild card weekend. They all can be in the Super Bowl. And then we're letting the draft come to us after that.
You got to go Hurts.
All right.
If he's there. And then
I'm taking whichever one of the three is left.
Yeah, you got to go Hurts if he's there, I think, and then pull up with Devonta Smith maybe in the second round.
Yeah, unless you get Saquon. I mean, we're definitely going whichever running back AJ. With the quarterback if we can get it. Saquon's probably a very hard pull, but Saquon, it's who you can try to get.
Where has AJ Brown been going, Joe?
I've been noticing basically the fourth roundish. His ADP.
AJ and Devonta?
AJ's Brown ADP. Oh, gosh. AJ Brown ADP is 9.4.
Okay.
So that would be the second round. And then Smith is 14. Which means theoretically, if we get Hurts, we could stack both of them, which would be tight.
I'd like to do that because, I mean, again, they're facing either Washington. Okay, they're facing either Washington or Green Bay. Washington is always logistically a tricky matchup for them. So that's not like a super blessing in that game. Daniels is catching fire, so that's just something to keep in mind.
I love this quarterback run.
Oh, wow. I was going to say it would be interesting to go with Patrick Mahomes.
But here's the problem. Who the hell are you pairing Mahomes with? It's got to be Kelsey, but I don't think I want to do that.
I'm taking Worthy. Worthy would be the best pairing for him, I think. I mean, Worthy could shellac Houston if Houston advances and could totally beat the Steelers defense.
See, I don't think Houston
He's
advances.
The best
I don't think it matters whether it's the Steelers, Baltimore, or the Chargers. I don't see Houston winning.
Hoping that happens. I'm absolutely hoping that happens.
No, I'm talking about realistically could it happen. I don't think realistically it could.
Bills and Lions? You don't think that could realistically happen? Look at all those quarterbacks.
No, I don't think you said Houston wins the first round. I don't think Houston can win the first round regardless of who they play. Bills Lions is a totally possible Super Bowl.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, theoretically, I mean, anything's possible, so I'm not writing anything off. But I think that Worthy could beat all three of the defenses. I mean, Worthy could beat Baltimore pretty bad, too. He has the skill set. I think he's a great combination. Jared Goff and Derrick Henry unstacked. That's weird.
He should have taken them all there.
Open up the door here. We've got options. What do you want to do? Are we taking
I want to go AJ Brown.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
And then if I can get Devontae on the comeback, I am. We're going all in on Philly, and then we're going to take a quarterback and see what team that puts us on. I really did like that late Charger stack, but
so here's the thing. If we go Philly here, that does wipe out any running back options from the NFC, and those are definitely the better running backs on the NFC side of the ball. So,
Bob, knowing that we can get the 2 Steeler ones late, I think we're getting 2 games out of the Steelers.
well,
I think the Steelers are beating Houston.
I was suggesting Pacheco or Hunt later to get an Eagles Kansas City.
Okay.
We'll just see how it lies.
Pacheco's ADP is about 30, so we'd have a pick in between there.
Okay.
So here's Devontae.
Okay, that's fine.
And then we're looking at running backs.
Watch the Eagles lose to Green Bay in the first round. Those assholes.
Well, then this one's dead. I mean, so I kind of like the idea of a dirty backdoor Steelers stack at the end.
Okay, I mean, right now, I think that logistically speaking, I think most of the NFC is off the picture for us. So we have to concentrate on the AFC.
Yeah. So Pacheco and Josh Jacobs. Well, Pacheco is the best AFC running back left by ADP.
Yeah, because
and then there's pretty much a fall off until you get to Hunt and then the Justice Hills of the world.
Okay. So this pick is going to be Pacheco.
This pick is either Pacheco or I would like to go quarterback actually.
Who?
I'm not totally sure actually.
We can't because it would be an AFC quarterback.
Yeah, but the AFC quarterbacks left, the highest one's Herbert, and that'd be a reach at this point. Be a big reach.
Take Pacheco here as a potential Kansas City, Philadelphia Super Bowl here.
Yeah, I was going to say I think we could get Pacheco on the turn.
I wouldn't risk it, honestly.
Right.
Looking at the stacks that are available, we're looking at We're looking at 2 AFC stacks, so maybe we can risk it.
So there's Pacheco.
Okay. I was going to say maybe we could have risked it because there's 2 AFC stacks happening there, and they wouldn't have run into it. But again, they're going to take a number 2 is definitely Minnesota, Baltimore.
Yeah. So where do you want to go with this next pick for us?
Someone from the Chiefs, maybe, if the value's there. We could take Herbert if we wanted to, if we thought that the Chargers were going to make it.
So Worthy's already off the board.
We could take somebody from Buffalo if you want.
I don't want Amari Cooper.
I'm not saying Amari. You could take
We could take Kincaid.
I wouldn't take Kincaid there.
What about Hollywood?
Too high for Hollywood, but if you think Kansas City's going to make it, then that's fine. Like if you beyond a shot, I mean, Kansas City has good matchups. If they make it, Hollywood could definitely do some business. So could DeAndre. Can you scroll down?
Yeah.
I think Hopkins could be decent.
All right, so we don't have any running backs though.
We can
go to Hopkins and a bunch of backs.
You took Hollywood? I don't like that.
You said Hollywood.
I said Hollywood or Hopkins. I was saying that I like Hopkins better.
Let's see where Hopkins. See, but this is the first ones of the year. Hopkins ADP is until 40. We can get him 2 rounds from now.
Well, Hollywood's ADP wasn't there either.
Hollywood's was 34. You're right. I took him around early.
All right. So, I mean, playing off the top half of the bracket. So, if we wanted a running back from the NFC to get us through a couple of games, we would need to take Kyron for 2 games, Bucky for 2 games.
So we're looking for 2 games players?
Well, we're going to ultimately need, because if we're assuming Pacheco, because we need 2 running backs because we don't have any running backs.
So 2-game running backs I see left are Kareem, Hill, and Dobbins, and Bucky maybe.
So we need Dobbins to get us a first-round running back. We can't leave it without a first-round running back.
Okay, Bob. I've already built the end of the draft stack.
Don't build it yet.
I already did.
Is Kyron still available or no?
Kyron Williams?
Yeah.
No, there's no way in hell he's available.
What about Brian Robinson?
Bob, we're on the clock. This is what screws us.
I asked, what about Brian Robinson?
Brian Robinson is available.
I'd say Brian Robinson or Dobbins.
Dobbins it is. All right. That's where I want to go. There was Dobbins anyway.
I like Brian Robinson though.
See, Hopkins is who we had slated as that pick. You like Brian Robinson too?
Well, I like Brian Robinson if he faces the Rams. If Washington ends up going to Philly, though, I don't like that at all because that limits us completely to not having,
So, Bob, I'm thinking for the next pick, we go Pickens. And then our last two picks are Warren and Russ.
I don't like that. We don't have enough Kansas City guys. If we're thinking that Philly and Kansas City are going to be the guys in
quarterback.
Yeah, but if we're thinking that Philly and Kansas City are going to be the guys in the Super Bowl, we need.
Well, this one became a Pennsylvania Super Bowl.
All right,
because this gives us the Pittsburgh. It would give us a full Pittsburgh stack and a full Philly stack
with a running back,
with running back and receiver.
Okay, shoot for it. See what happens.
All right. We might even be able to get both of Pittsburgh's running backs.
Mixon could run on the Steelers, though.
Mixon ain't running on the Steelers.
I think Mixon could run on the Steelers. Steelers are not playing well.
No, they're not. There is no way around that. But we're going to finish up the Steelers stack.
So this is either going to be if this gets played properly, this is going to be Philly plus Pacheco
plus Hollywood
plus Hollywood, or it's going to be Philly plus the Steelers if everything goes out right.
Yeah, so if Philly and the Steelers are in it,
I don't like that. That's gross. But hey, it's something. It's something though.
Well, it gave you a full stack of both teams. It gives you Pacheco in the. It gives us three. If Philly's in the Super Bowl, the only weak spot of this team potentially is the running back room, and we're taking 3 of the 7 AFC teams' running backs.
That's a good odds. That puts good odds in our favor.
It's basically a Philly Super Bowl.
Well, it's a PA Super Bowl.
Yeah. So this pick should be Justice Hill.
So we need 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 wide receivers, and then a flex. Yes?
1 quarterback, 1 running back, 1 tight end, or 1 receiver, 1 flex. There's 6 starters.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't need a tight
end. That doesn't sound. I thought you needed 6. Pull it up, Bob. Officially, I don't want to go up the screen and mess with myself.
I'm seeing that you need a starting lineup that is 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 wide receivers / tight ends, and then a flex.
Oh, 2 receivers. Okay, that makes sense. It adds up to 6. That's what I know.
So I mean, you could take a back end. You could take a Freiermuth too.
I know. No. So you got to hope the other team has 1. So there's Justice Hill to give you a extra AFC running back option.
I don't like that you did that, but that's okay.
Dude, I'm taking 4 running backs. Oh shit, we don't have any from the NFC.
That's what I'm saying. I told you
it has to be Philly. We're this lineup loses if Philly isn't in it.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I think that's fine, and I think it's fine to load up here. But why didn't you just take Warren or Najee?
I just took Warren right now.
Oh, I can't see that.
Oh, sorry. The last 2 picks are Warren and Russ.
Over Najee?
Yeah, I took Warren over Najee, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City's a tough matchup for running backs. I mean, they are a really tough matchup for running backs. I mean,
so assuming we get Russ, here's going to be the final roster, Bob. Jalen and Russ. Running backs are Pacheco, Dobbins, Hill, and Warren. Your receivers are A.J. Brown, Devontae, Hollywood, and George Pickens.
So
it sounds sexy.
So ideally what we need to happen for this lineup to make bank would be Philly to go to the Super Bowl, which is not out of the realm of possibility.
No, it's not.
It's a very real possibility. And then one of Kansas City, Steelers, or the Chargers.
Or Baltimore, because we do have Hill.
Or Baltimore. That would give us, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 running back chances from the AFC and then the Philly stack.
Yeah, the only realistic one you're missing is Buffalo.
Okay, I mean, that's possible. I like it.
Yeah. It got a little gross there. I mean, obviously we would need our guys to blow up, but
yeah,
you know, The best part about Philly is they're playing in the first week. So it's not like going all in on Kansas City where they're on a
Right.
bye and you can't use those guys and you need to build a stack around them.
Right. Nick, it's actually pretty nice today, man. Yesterday there were wind gusts of 50 miles per hour, starting at like 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, that was rough.
But it was like 61 degrees all day. Thankfully, my kid had his best night sleeping last night in like 3 weeks. Because he's teething. He's getting 2 teeth right now.
Oh, shit.
So
top and bottom or both bottom?
Both bottom.
Nice.
We're in like a shit storm over there with that, but super cranky. But again, 61 degrees, and it's supposed to snow, I think, Thursday.
Sounds right.
Absolutely disgusting. Steve, we don't. To be honest with you, Joe and I would not be able to maintain and give great content, and join you guys on a daily basis in that way. That's why our content's on YouTube only right now. Just because I'm a teacher, like Joe's an entrepreneur.
Hey, listen, if ESPN wants to sign us, though, we'll be able to take that money and make it work.
Oh yeah. I mean, hey, like I said to Joe yesterday, I was looking really good in my DFS lineups going into Sunday night's games, and then Jerome Ford just cracking his ankle.
Which, again, you can't project.
Totally submarine me. But you know what was really funny? I was talking with Joe that my boy Amir Abdullah would have gotten me into some good money yesterday had I put him in that lineup. It would have opened the door. I took a mini stack in Thielen and McMillan yesterday with Baker. I didn't play Evans. I went a little bit rogue on that. I played Addison because I thought that game was going to be slightly more scoring. And James Cook cooked me pretty hard. But again, I love the uniqueness of these teams in best ball right now. I think that to win it this year, obviously you've got to have your obviously. Yeah, I mean, looking at Chase Brown, I think that he should have went in for the touchdown. He absolutely, I mean, I just have a hard time with this ankle injury. I hope that he's going to be fully healthy. And they're actually a team that could make some noise. If they end up in the 7th seed and Denver's not, I would not be surprised if they beat Buffalo, to be honest with you. Yeah, for Burrow to score, it sucks because Chase Brown owners, we kind of all knew that something tricky like that was going to happen. Burrow always ends up doing something like that. I would have much preferred a Chase Brown touchdown in that regard for you, Steve, especially. But I think, Joe, in one of these, I think it'd be pretty nice if we build like a low end Burrow.
You want to build a Burrow stack?
I'm not saying I want to, but I'm just saying I think that,
dude, he's not making the playoffs. I'm not throwing the money away.
I get it, but I'm just saying I think that.
All right, do you want to go Hurts again, or do you want to go off script?
Go Hurts again. I don't want to put too many Hurts lineups together, though.
Well, we got the 3rd pick again, dude. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh yeah, Nick. Actually, at one point in time, Joe's brother's wife was a season ticket holder, and she and him went to a bunch of games. The console, PPG Paints Arena, is pretty nice. Although their upper deck, and Joe can tell you this too, their upper deck is really like this.
That's steep as hell, man.
It's really, really steep. So when you go to a game, if you ever sit up in the upper deck at PPG Paints, it's pretty crazy. And if Nick, if you would have walked in to PPG Paints Arena about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, totally different atmosphere. But you're catching the Penguins at the back end of the Sidney Crosby years, at the back end of the Evgeny Malkin years, and it's like the air has been sucked out. If they end up making the playoffs this year, it will be like a godsend.
Sure will be.
I mean, because Sidney Crosby, I mean, I was looking this up the other day. I was talking to my mom over Christmas, and Mellon Arena was the shit. Literally, like it was shit and it was the shit at the same time. The
It was
atmosphere was just
beautiful. So beautiful.
totally different. I love touching the roof if you got an upper deck seat.
Oh yeah.
At the Igloo. But fun fact about Sidney Crosby. He's been in the league 20 years.
Hey, side story on your fun facts. If King Henry's still on the board, I'm taking him.
Okay, fair enough.
That way we don't pure Philly build all again.
Facing the Chargers will be a great matchup for him, and facing Houston would be a great match too.
How about him against Buffalo? Because that's what we're going to see in the second round.
Yeah, as long as you go next pick, Devonta Smith.
Hey, well, Devontae, that pick was either going to be AJ Brown or King Henry. It got made for me, right?
Yeah.
So Devontae's the next one up.
Yeah, I love the Civic Arena, Mellon Arena, however you want to call it. But I can't believe that Sidney Crosby has been in the league 20 years, and he's only 37 years old. I mean, he is 1 year older than me.
Oh, all right, Devontae just went, Bob. We need to stop reminiscing. We got 10 seconds.
Well, what do you think? What wide receiver do you want to go with? I mean,
I ain't going JMO. I don't like that. I don't like any of these receivers. Puka's, I guess, the only one I like.
Well, okay. Well, then let's pivot to a quarterback. What quarterback from the other side? You want to go? Is there a quarterback?
Goff's on the board.
But there's 2 NFC quarterbacks. It's up to you. Make a decision.
There's no AFC quarterbacks I like.
Go with the best player available then.
That's Goff.
I don't like that at all.
I don't like it either.
Well, at least they're top half, bottom half of the bracket.
All right, so we're going all Philly, all Detroit again.
Well, no, we can only take one of the other, because this is an unstacked Hurts.
This is an unstacked Hurts and an unstacked Goff.
Yeah, why'd you do that? This is not.
He was best available. I don't like. All right, here's the fundamental problem. I don't like Shakir. I don't like Worthy.
It doesn't matter if you like them. It doesn't matter.
No, I don't think they're going to produce.
I disagree. It gives us a chance. Like this gives us no chance now. Two unstacked NFC quarterbacks. I would have rather had an unstacked Jane Daniels later than an unstacked Jared Goff, because Jared Goff, Jane Daniels can at least do it by himself. Jared Goff can't.
That is fair.
But
this one just might be throwing money away.
So if we're gonna pull down, if you're gonna be throwing money away, at least pair Goff up with Sam Laporta, depending on his ADP.
23, so that would be this pick.
Yeah, I mean, at least pair him up with that. Take it if you want to
see if Monty's back. Try to get a backdoor Monty.
I wouldn't. If you want.
I love Monty, dude. You're not talking me out of him. Throw him later in the draft.
If this is going to be how you're going to approach the NFC side of things, and you're just kind of going to say, "Oh, I'm just going to take one of these NFC teams, and hopefully they make it to the Super Bowl." I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could also then take a Burrow late, a Russ late.
I kind of like that Steeler stack at the end. I might be giving them more credit than anyone else, but I think we're getting 2 games on the Steelers.
They could definitely beat Houston. I don't think they beat Kansas City, though.
Yeah, but if they do, then you basically are in the finals with the Steelers stack.
That's fair.
So I'm cool with this Detroit love we're getting here. If I can get Kyra on this next pick, I'm 100% going to.
Yeah, I mean,
we got King Henry. I guess I need a receiver more than more than a back. I go to Puka then instead of Kyron.
But you're spraying the board on the NFC side too much. I don't really like that, but that's okay. Nick, I definitely taken a Leafs game. Toronto.
Leafs are awesome. That's a great venue, man.
Toronto is a good atmosphere for a hockey game. I mean, honestly speaking, we're big on football, but you see me wearing a Penguins hoodie, for the last 20 years, right? For most of our life, Sidney Crosby has been in our life here in Pittsburgh, and watching the Penguins win Stanley Cups. I mean, there's Super Bowl championships for the Steelers are great, but those Stanley Cups were really nice too. Really, really.
Well, they were all at the same time.
Yeah. It was a nice couple of years.
Yeah,
and then we've been living in mediocrity, and just making it to the playoffs and then losing in all sports except for baseball that one year.
They've been in the playoffs like 3 times with baseball when they started counting the wild cards playoffs.
Yeah. Hey, Diego. So who you going with here, Joe? As we look at Diego's question here,
I'm probably going Monty or Christian Bateman than Monty. So right now the roster is, before we put those on it, is Hertz and Goff, Henry, Laporta, Puka is who we have so far.
So you're hoping for either Detroit or Philly to make it, and then
Baltimore on the other side.
Okay, that's fair.
So I'm going Baltimore hard, and then I'll probably finish out the last 3 picks with a Steelers hedge.
So you're going Bateman here,
and then Monty on the comeback.
Monty, I don't see as being a necessity necessarily.
Well, single-handedly, we only have 1 running back.
Yeah.
And here's your running backs left. Mixon is the number 1 running back. Monty's the number 2. Then goes Hunt and Justice Hill. Now we do have King Henry, so Justice Hill might make sense as a carryover. So I'm okay with risking it but this next pick is either Justice Hill or Monty.
What about Hunt though? Hunt could give us 2 games before he meets Monty, or before he meets Henry.
We'll line them up by ADP and see who we get. I mean, there's a chance to get them all, right? And then we have 4 picks left. So if we're going to do
Joe,
the Steeler stack, which I'm not necessarily sure we need to do.
No, I don't think we need to either. I mean, it's a good insurance policy. So correct me if I'm incorrect here. If Baltimore lands the 3 seed, they face the Chargers, who are the 6 seed.
Yep, and then they'll play Buffalo.
Then they play Buffalo. But if they're the 5 seed, they end up playing Kansas City. Yes?
In all probability, yeah.
I would have taken Hunt there, to be honest.
Oh, I just did it by ADP. I just had that lined up. See, dude, I've loved Monty the whole year. If he's healthy enough to play, I want Hunt. I want the Detroit running backs much more than I want Kansas City running backs.
Well, no,
this keeps us stacked on just isolating the few teams.
But what I'm saying though is that Hunt, if not playing Baltimore, gives us 2 games potentially. Monty, we don't know if he's actually going to give us 1.
I see where you're at.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, Hunt's giving you the division in the AFC Championship is the belief there.
Right. And then
Justice Hill could give you 3.
But Derrick Henry could give us 3 as well.
Yeah, and you only need 1 running back. So
that's what I'm saying.
Still here, I should do Goddard.
You hedged it on Detroit, and I think that was the bad hedge.
Yeah. It really goes back to that 3rd pick because we only have Hurts as our only Eagle.
Right.
Laporta is our only pass catcher. So at least we have 3 from Detroit, though.
But so say it's Detroit. Who would we need on the opposite side? Baltimore? Detroit and Baltimore is a possibility.
Because we have Bateman.
If you take Goddard,
both of Baltimore's running backs.
If you take Goddard here.
Goddard isn't on the board. I was about to, but he wasn't on the board.
When did he go?
Goddard went early, man.
That's weird.
Let me pull up.
Down by 12, Diego, with Purdy and Amon-Ra playing against Laporta and Debo, 6-point passing TDs. How are we looking? So I actually do think we talked about this earlier, Diego. We've been doing a couple of best ball playoffs here. Amon-Ra, I think we have safely in at around about 15 points. You could easily see, 6 receptions, 80 yards, maybe 4 receptions, 60 yards, and a touchdown somewhere in that framework. We have a viewer up in the chat who needs Laporta to ball out.
Hopkins or Pickens?
What?
Hopkins or Pickens?
Are you stacking the Steelers?
Yep.
Then Pickens if you're stacking the Steelers. Looking at Diego, looking at what we think is going to happen here, there is a likelihood that Debo is probably somewhere sub 16 points. He always could go off for about 20, but a sub 16 points in a half PPR league. In a half PPR league, obviously you're looking for the touchdowns. I think that in a half PPR league, you've got a definite leg up owning the quarterback. In a PPR league, I think you know there's some ground to make up. But seeing as you have Laporta and Debo, who are sub 20% of the target share on their team, typically speaking. I think that realistically, in order for you to lose, you're going to need Laporta and Debo to both score a touchdown tonight. I think you're in a really good situation because I think that Brock Purdy could throw 2 touchdowns. So then you end up getting up, and I don't think that the Lions are going to intercept Purdy at all. I think you're in a good situation, Diego. I'm rooting for you, man. Might be too nervous about fantasy night to even sleep. Feels like it blew it when I started Spears over Devonta and the Miami defense over Philly. But Nick, here's the thing, man. Absorbing content, absorbing weather reports and all that stuff. A lot of people walked into that Miami Browns game playing those defenses and saying, oh, this is going to be a good matchup because it's backup quarterbacks, shitty weather and whatnot. And Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys had been playing so well leading up into last week. Well, not so well, but well comparatively to what they're happening with. But they got hit with that CeeDee Lamb effect. CeeDee Lamb really makes a difference for this team, and you saw what difference this team had with not having CeeDee Lamb. And Philly, again, was a good enough defensive play this week. Nobody thought Devonta Smith was going to be in that market of 33 points, Nick. Let's be serious here. I think you walked yourself into a PPR point total for Devonta Smith somewhere in like 15 to 18 points. But with the unsureness of Kenny Pickett and then them pulling in Tanner McKee later in that game, all of the target shares that we had been looking at throughout the course of the year basically were thrown out the window when those 2 quarterbacks came in there. So Spears was a great play. I mean, looking at Spears prior to him going down, he was playing well. Just pulling up the stats really quickly to make sure we have them to reference. 20 carries for 95 yards and 3 receptions. He had a concussion when did he get a concussion? I can't remember. Somewhere in that game, he ended up going down with concussion. I want to say it was late in the third quarter. So he plays another full quarter. He gets you that 100-yard milestone, and he probably gets you at least 8 more points on the ground. Yeah. I think Spears was a great play. That injury just totally submarined his chances to get you above 20 points. He was there. He was going to be there. And like I said, nobody was figuring Devonta Smith to go off for 33 points. I mean, not anybody. True. All right, guys, we will be back next Monday. We're going to be talking maybe on Friday, Joe. Maybe on Friday.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Maybe probably Thursday. I can't do Friday, but maybe Thursday.
All right, we'll be back this Thursday to do a couple more best ball fantasy playoffs, talk more about schedules. Lost the finals by over 100. Jackson.
Bro.
It sucks, man. It sucks because we had a lot of players that ended up, a lot of the guys we've been talking about all year ended up playing up stinkers this week, which was, uncomparably to have. If you had one of them, it was okay. If you had 4 of them, it sucked. But yes, we'll be back Thursday, most likely, 3:45 Thursday. Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully we can, this. Reed's dead to me. I love Reed, but he's dead to me for fantasy purposes.
Dude, getting to the finals with Breece Hall's an accomplishment, Jackson. You really got to recognize that.
Gibbs to the moon.
Breece Hall, like every Jet, is a life crusher.
But we'll be joining you again this week sometime. We don't know if it's Thursday or Friday, one of the two. 3:45 Eastern, and then we'll be doing a couple more shows next week as well as we pivot to looking at fantasy playoff best ball. And hopefully we can give you the edge as we go into the next part of the season here. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Good luck tonight for all of you that need it.
Welcome to Local Football Flavor, connecting the fan bases of the NFL.